Hey DG fam, Rima Fadlela here, proud daughter of Dearborn, avid vibe capitalist, and professional love letter.
And I'm Yasmeen Kadu, your Dearborn girl poster child that is a lifelong learner and loves all things social justice.
So we're gonna switch it up a little bit. We call these the DG takes, and anytime the episode has a DG takes in front of it, it's your hosts talking about Dearborn related topics. So today's topic is going to be on being Dearborn outside of Dearborn. And what we've done to prepare for this discussion is each of us have three questions either on our paper or on our phone that we are going to ask each other. Yasmeen doesn't know what questions I prepared for her, so I get to put her on the spot and vice versa. So we're actually going to let her go first and put me on the spot.
Okay, Rima. So your first question is, tell me about the first time you realized you were so Dearborn.
Dang. Okay, I have a story. I have a funny story. So the first time I realized I was so Dearborn, ironically, was in Lebanon. So I was lucky enough growing up to be able to go to Lebanon every summer. And one of our favorite pastimes when we were spending our summers in Lebanon was going to Splash Mountain, which is this like huge water park and there's just a bunch of little Arabs running around having fun. And I was there with my cousins who are also from Dearborn, and we're like running to get to another water slide, and this boy, he was wearing like these Hollister shorts, and like he stops me and he's like, "Are you from Dearborn?" And I'm like 16 years old at this point, right? Fully like in Fortson with like the Fortson girl attitude, and I just like, he asked if I was from Dearborn, so I did the natural thing that anyone does in that situation and just like raised my eyebrow and like gave him that this like attitude look.
That's the most Dearborn thing
Yeah,
you could possibly do.
ever. So I'm like, I just stop and I'm like, why? Okay, so I don't even answer his question, but I also like get super defensive, and I just was like, why are you? And he's like, no, actually, I'm not. I'm from. He like thought he was so cool, so it kind of annoyed me more. He's like, actually, I'm from Florida, but I know like I have a lot of family in Dearborn, and like you just kind of like you're acting like a Dearborn girl and you have the demeanor and you walk and talk like one. So, and as soon, I know like for a fact, as soon as I said why, like I completely affirmed his response. Like I basically answered yes. And so I tried to act a little nicer after that, like, oh, okay, cool. But it was funny because walking away from that interaction, and I remember like later that day and even in the years after that, I'm like, first of all, number one, like, why was I so like why was I so defensive as if it were a bad thing to be called so Dearborn? And number two, like I don't know, like why is that our go-to to just be very defensive? So I always reflect back on that moment. And another really quick story I do want to share because it's kind of a full circle moment, and it was honestly almost about a year ago. I've told you this story, Yasmeen, but I went on a trip to Miami with one of my close friends who's from Detroit actually, and she and I were just like on South Beach at a restaurant eating, and I remember I kept hearing like a really like familiar noise behind me, and I'm like, why do these voices sound familiar? I'm not home. And so finally, like, I snap out of it and I turn around and I just see these three boys who are so Dearborn. And what I mean by that is like the eyebrows, the fades, and the accents, and like just even like the like the V-necks, like, with
Yeah.
the chains and like everything.
Yeah.
And I'm like, like I just had to be so sure that they were from Dearborn for me to literally turn around and ask them, which is what I did because I was at that point I was positive. I'm like to my friend Gloria, like, these boys are from Dearborn, watch. So I turn around and I'm like, are you guys from Dearborn? And they're just like, yeah, why? Okay, and they like kind of did the thing that I did, and I think I got up and like literally like I wanted to go hug them, but I'm like they're gonna think I'm crazy. So I went and sat with them. Me and my friend sat with them. Like we had arguile. Like we just had like a great night. They were so nice. Like it was just such a beautiful moment of me seeing people from my hometown outside of Dearborn, and just like not being able to pinpoint what it is about us that makes us so Dearborn, but still understanding that on such a vivid, like deep level.
So interesting. Do you okay, so we know that there's a brand and we know that all of these things that you just described were the So Dearborn brand. But do you
Right.
think people know that?
I think that we know that being outside of Dearborn. Like I think being here, we're so used to people who are like us, and we're so used to things being done our way or said our way or just like our own norms, that it's not until we leave and we're kind of out of that comfort zone, or we do things that might be off-putting to other people and they're just kind of like, whoa, like even good or bad things. It's not even just
Definitely.
like, it's just, and not even just good or bad things, just neutral things sometimes, like offering to pay the bill, or just being super generous all the time. Certain ways that we pronounce words. It was in those moments going away for college for me where I realized that, oh, this must be a Dearborn thing. Because it also, having the privilege to go overseas and see how my cousins who are Lebanese act, realizing that this isn't a Lebanese thing. So it's gotta be this
So,
like very
yeah.
unique, specific experience that I have.
Yeah, it's so different. It's definitely not. I mean, I'm sure people of all like nationalities from Dearborn could probably say the same thing. Where if you're here, you go to Yemen, or you're here and you go to Palestine. Like they're not the same.
Right.
Like we
At
have
all.
this completely different brand that everybody just embraces without even knowing, honestly.
Yeah, so this is actually perfect for my first question for you. So Yasmeen, a lot of times talks about fitting in. She loves Dearborn because she feels like this is a place where we fit in a world where nobody fits in, or in a community where nobody fits in.
Yeah, you
And
got it right.
yeah, and so I kind of want you to tell, like, was that your story? And if it was, tell us about your story and tell us about so what it was like fitting in somewhere where you don't fit in, and how you see that now as an adult.
Yeah, so I think growing up, I constantly felt like I didn't fit in. I felt like high school, I didn't fit in. Even, I mean, probably dating it back to middle school, like I just felt like there was no space in my school or my community that I felt completely comfortable being myself. And maybe that was a coming of age thing, but I think it kind of even transcended to college too, where I went to school, I went to college in Dearborn, I went to U of M Dearborn, I went to Dearborn High, but it was never.
Boo.
Okay, chill. But it was never something that I felt that there was a place for me. And then I kind of came to this realization where it's like, okay, wait, nobody fits in. There's not a single category of what it means to be a Dearborn girl or a Dearborn guy or a Dearborn anything. And I think that's something so beautiful about our brand, is that we have so many interesting parts and so many different facets that, yeah, we can pinpoint certain things, but I don't think there's a singular brand. So I think in reclaiming what it means to be like proudly from Dearborn, I've been able to take something where I don't fit in and make myself like fit in, and that's my line. I've been saying repeatedly, I love fitting in a place where nobody fits in. And I think it's a common thing too, where I've been having conversations more so with women in the community lately, just the nature of us creating this space, and people have been sharing the same exact thing where, yeah, no, I never felt like I fit in, but it's
Right.
not something we talk about, and
It's
it
not, because you feel like an imposter. Because I felt that way too, you know, and like you always attributed it to something wrong with you. Like, oh, like for me, it was like, oh, I don't fit in because like my dad's the principal and people probably think I'm a nerd. And it's like all these stories, like I'm cool, but I'm a nerd. So I'm just like, who am I really, you know?
Yeah.
And so like it's just this weird narrative that you tell yourself and you're ashamed of it a little. So why would you confess to other people that you don't feel that way? But if you did, you would probably see that like you actually you're all fitting in to the exact place that you belong, you know.
Exactly, exactly. It's like it's a weird thing that I think we need to start acknowledging more, because once we do, we'll just be able to go over those barriers and those obstacles to feeling like we quote unquote fit in.
Right.
Okay, so I guess this might be a good transition now for my next question for you. So when you leave Dearborn, what's one Dearborn thing you always carry with you?
Do you mean that figuratively or literally?
Either way you'd like to answer.
Okay. Okay, let me think. Ooh.
I mean, I think probably the first thing is, I'm not going to answer your question for you, actually, no.
Yeah, don't answer my question. I don't
I'm
even know.
sorry.
Wait, what would my answer be?
I was going to say, I mean, one thing that we always carry with each other is our, like, a Dearborn accent. Like,
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
know if I don't think I
I
necessarily.
was trying, so I mean, because I'm poetic, my natural inclination was to think figuratively, like, oh, what is like the nafsiyya of like being
Yeah.
Dearborn? How do I carry that with me? But I was wondering if there was also a staple object that is really funny that I carry with me, but we can get to that. So I think for me, definitely my generosity is something that regardless where I went, I think people notice that about me. And the reason that this has been this was an easy answer for me is because it's kind of something that is off-putting to people. Like, you're just gonna bring us food, or you're just gonna like
Oh, yeah.
cook for us. And I'm like, yeah. Like, so when I went, I did an internship in Sacramento, and it happened to be during Ramadan. And actually, one of my close friends who was interning with me, who's not at all from Michigan. She's not Arab, she's not Muslim, but she's like, no, like if you're doing Ramadan, like I'm doing it with you. Like I'm not about to let you fast by yourself. So that was amazing.
Yeah.
But every night she and I would make iftar together, and like we'd cook and whatever. But the last day, so actually during the Eid, of course I was still in Sacramento, so I couldn't spend it with the family. I did like a whole like just azime with a bunch of people in my internship program, and I like made a whole bunch of stuff, and my friend Tori helped me as well, and they were just kind of thrown off, like I don't have to pay, I don't have to bring anything, and I'm like, no, like No. And so I do that a lot, even being at Ross, being at Michigan. I bring like things from the bakery. I try to bring pieces of Dearborn as much as I can, even if I'm not in Michigan, like Arabic food, just through our culture and kind of let people experience that because it's something that I love so much about our upbringing and our identity that I want to be able to share with other people. So that's something I take with me regardless where I go.
You know what's interesting? You say that too, because I think I find myself doing that a lot, and even just showcasing different aspects of not only like the Dearborn culture, but the Arab American culture. And so when I say that I'm like the poster child for Dearborn, Dearborn girl poster child, I'm going to get my line correctly. People are just like, completely and totally shocked, and they're like, you're not like what it means to be a Dearborn girl, like you don't fit that brand. And I think that's probably jumping from like the last question too, but it's very interesting because I feel like you and I specifically like are very aware of being representatives of our community. Sure. And I think it's probably something that we definitely carry with us always. And I think most people can say that too, but it's something that they don't do, and they know, I'm sorry, they unknowingly do.
Yeah, agree. It's crazy, and I agree. Like, I think it's because of the amount of times we've spent outside of it where we become hyper aware of like, damn, like, unfortunately, I'm going to have to be the token right now, and that sucks. But someone will never have an experience. It's like a lot of these people will never experience this community, whether it be in Dearborn or other Arab pockets or Muslim pockets throughout the United States. I may very well be the only one that they meet. So how do I want that experience to be? And I don't think the burden should ever be on any type of minority to do that. But I kind of look at it as an honor, and I want to take responsibility for that. So in those moments where I think people are open, I try to really represent us in a very positive light, because that is the real light. Like, that's who we are.
Definitely. It's funny because my friends from outside of Dearborn, even if they're Arab, even if they're Muslim, they say anything bad about Dearborn, like, that's it. It's over. Like they just know that they've just entered like a sinking ship. Wow. And they're just not going to be able to.
So that's a deal breaker if you were dating someone, huh?
Yeah, it is, and I know that's what you want to segue into, but I want to finish my thought. So I'm not gonna cop out of this. I'm officially trapped in this sinking.
I warned Yasmeen I was gonna ask her a dating question, but we'll get to that in a second.
So okay, so they can't say anything bad about Dearborn ever, guy, girl, anybody. But the second I want to talk about Dearborn, like, I'm allowed to criticize Dearborn. I'm allowed to make thoughtful criticism too, where it's like, I'm not going to be like, Dearborn sucks, and Dearborn's just this place where it's so boring, nothing happens, the vibes are all off. I'm never going to say that, but I'm going to say, like, yeah, like, we should improve on X, Y, and Z, and, like, this is why. So it's something I feel like you probably carry as a representative. But, yes, by all means, put me on the hot seat, Rima.
To that point, though, I think a good way to look at it, that I've learned to look at it, is if I love someone, so someone in my family, like, I love them so much that I'm going to be hyper aware of their flaws because I care about them and I'm interested in their well-being and I'm invested in their well-being. But someone outside of my family saying anything about my family members already knows they're like entering into a Shark Tank. Like, don't try it.
Exactly.
And even if I know that you kind of care about them, like, you don't know them the way that I do. And so don't bring that over here. Like, we're handling it. We're good. And that's kind of how I feel about Dearborn, is like, you're not from here. We're handling it. We're good. Don't come near us. You know? So that's how I feel about that.
Yeah.
But on to the juicy stuff.
By all means, Rima.
Have you dated non-Dearborn men? Yes or no?
Yes.
If yes, compare that experience, or those experiences, if they were more than one, with dating in Dearborn. Go.
Okay, so dating in Dearborn, we like to talk about this a lot, where it's something that's accelerated. Like, it moves like, you know that.
Skip, what is it in Monopoly?
Yeah.
Skip, go, I don't know.
Yeah. Pass, go, collect $200. You're married, here's the ring. So yeah, I think that happens a lot with dating in Dearborn. So I think that when you're dating outside of Dearborn, from my experience, if you're dating an Arab guy, or if he's not Arab, it tends to be it's a more slower pace, and it's a more like normal thing, where we call it the Dearborn database.
Yeah.
So if you're dating a guy in Dearborn, you know exactly like who he is, like his mom, his sister, like his dog.
Dearborn database. You click on a name, whether you have met him or not. You don't even have to know what he looks like. You click on a name, and there's just this whole track record that you can get from whoever you want in Dearborn. Ask around. And unless they're, some of these guys do a great job. Kudos to the guys who are just very private. But I found more, and Yasmeen's a great stalker, so Yasmeen looks up people for me. And if I even bring up a guy's name, Yasmeen has already done the whole
Yeah,
background
just
check.
bring me his first name.
But
I got
yeah,
you, Rima.
the Dearborn database is a good and bad thing. We could talk about that in a little.
Yeah, so you already know all of these things, so I think it makes it easier to like accelerate moving forward. But then it's kind of problematic because it's like there's some things that you probably should find out in a more natural way. So dating guys outside of Dearborn, you don't know. So there's like sometimes I feel like a lot of times it doesn't go anywhere farther than the initial phase because like you don't have all of that background knowledge. But then there's also like the very literal sense of like dating and being physically in Dearborn and dating and being physically somewhere else. Where when you're physically in Dearborn and you go out to have coffee with someone, for example, you are hyper aware of your surroundings and you're hyper aware of who you're gonna see and who's gonna run and tell like so and so. And it's so frustrating because it's like, what if you just want to have a guy friend? Like, what if you and your guy friend just want to chill, get coffee, and, like, you don't want everyone going to, like, tell everybody.
Yeah.
So when you're dating outside of Dearborn, I remember the first time I ever went out on a date, and I was in California, and I was interning for the summer, and I went out to coffee, and I was just like, oh, I don't have to look around. Literally nobody knows me here. Nobody knows me here. It was revolutionary experience,
So
Rima.
amazing.
I didn't have to look over and whatnot, but it's very different. I mean, even guys in Dearborn, like I want to shout out our guys and say that they have a lot of respect for Dearborn women.
Yeah.
And I think that there's so many times where we are nagging on our guys, and rightfully so, and we probably should, but I think that like at this very moment, I do want to shout out our guys and say that they are awesome and they're super respectful and just they understand that if I tell them I have to be home by 11 o'clock and I'm 24 years old, you're going to understand like, yeah, she has to be home by 11 o'clock.
Right.
And they're never going to question that. And I think that's something that I definitely took for granted in the times where I did date guys that didn't live in Dearborn, because they would always ask like, no, like, my parents want me home or my parents say this, and it was always a question of like, why are you listening to your parents so much?
Get that so much from men and women, like guys and girls that I'm friends with outside of this community. And honestly, like that was a huge. So I put you on the spot. I can share some stuff too, but that was a huge. So there was a point in my life where I wasn't sure I wanted to end up with someone from here, right? I wasn't even sure I cared about him having the same identity as me. But there was a certain point in time where. Just through my experiences having friends, talking to people who didn't share my identities, felt like I always had to explain myself 24/7. And I think what's worse is because our narrative is one that's still fairly new in this country and is one that lacks a lot of media representation. When you explain it, they still don't get it. And it's like, and I've had this experience with classmates right now. Like I'm 26 years old. I'm fairly good at like communicating and advocating for myself, but a couple of classmates where I'm like, yeah, like my parents could still like, there's a lot of situations where I still care to listen to my parents. Like, and if my mom says this, I'm going to listen. And like, sure, could I rebel against my mom and just raise hell? Of course I could. Like, who can't? But like, I actually don't want to. Like, I'm not an oppressed human being because my mom tells me something and I listen, you know? And having to explain that to a significant other over and over, little tiny things like that get exhausting. And so that was the turning point where I'm like, nah. He needs to be from Dearborn, he needs to be Arab, he needs to be Muslim, like from Fortson, you know, because
so wait, quick.
Do you remember that?
Quick segue. I'm gonna. So the way that one time Rima and I were at Bohemian Bowls. And it was last Ramadan, and she was just saying she was being when Rima talks. Sometimes she's a little loud. So there were a whole bunch of people around, and she's like, "I just really want a Fortson guy," and says it very loud. And so then I just start laughing because that's just a normal thing.
I didn't think I was that loud. We were sitting on like the ledge. And I don't know why we were talking about it, but I'm like, I don't know. I just come to the conclusion that I just need a Dearborn-ass, Fortson-ass guy. I think that's how I said it.
Yes, that was the line.
And then, like, we all started laughing because it's something that I would say, and I wholeheartedly meant it, and I can explain the more intellectual, theoretical reasons why I feel that way. But this guy, wallah, did, like, he turned around, and then he, like, looked at me, but, like, he realized I caught him, and then he turned back, like, he turned to face forward, and so I'm like, I'm sorry, like, I forgot what I said. Like, I'm like, oh, did you hear me? And then he turns away. He's like, listen, honestly, like, I'm not trying to eavesdrop or anything, wallah, but, like, I've just never heard that before. Honestly,
that was
shocked.
But it was kind of a sad moment when you really think about it, because he went to Fortson.
Yeah,
he was
yeah.
a Fortson guy, and like why is that so
Yeah.
unbelievable? Like, why is that
Well,
so unbelievable?
after I cleared up the fact that I wasn't trying to put out an ad, to all of Dearborn for what I was interested in, me and him actually talked about it. And I'm like, listen, like, we get a lot of bad rep. And that's a reason that we wanted to start this space, is that it's never the popular thing to say that I want to be with a Dearborn guy. In reality, when you really isolate, like, what values we were raised with in this community, and obviously me going to Fortson, it was just a different experience for me. Like, when we isolate what those identities are, there's a lot to be proud of, and because those are things that I feel extremely attached to, I would love to see those things reflected in my significant other. And I'm not saying that, like, I wouldn't even look at him if he wasn't from here. Like, obviously that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the likelihood that I am compatible with someone from outside of here, given how deeply I identify with values that I got from here, is kind of slim.
Yeah.
And if he was from somewhere else, he'd have to be a unicorn who just, like, was somehow ingrained with these kinds of values. So yeah, that's kind of my thing, and it's unpopular opinion, but it's kind of fun to say, just to see people's reactions.
Oh, quite the reactions, okay.
So, wait, was that your question for me?
Yeah, I guess I turned it
So,
on you.
where do you see yourself in 10 years? So, we talk a lot about how much we love Dearborn. Obviously, we consider ourselves poster children. Talk about where you see yourself physically. Like, are you in Dearborn? Are you not? And, like, also just walk me through, like, what your life looks like in 10 years.
Okay. In 10 years, I don't know if I'm still in Dearborn. I'm going to be completely honest, just because I don't know. I just don't know. But I do know that in 10 years from now, I do want to be on the forefront of the movement to empower the Arab American voice. And I think that there's no better representation of that voice than Dearborn. And we should be that dominant voice. And I want to work solely on making sure that our community understands the value in itself and understands the fact that it can and will change that narrative and change the anti-Arab, anti-Muslim rhetoric that needs to just go because there's no reason for it.
I love that.
Thank you.
What kind of roles do you see yourself in?
I'm just an activist at heart. So, like, anything with changing public opinion, like being in media, being, like, creating more spaces like this for people to have conversation. Like, as much as I love policy, and that's what I studied, that's my previous job, was working with the government, with policy initiatives. I just don't, at this point in my life, I don't see that being something that really inspires change as much as public opinion, because I think it starts with public opinion and then it goes into policy. But I think the way that public opinion is able to evoke any sort of emotion with somebody, and through storytelling and through making people change their minds about things that they didn't ever think that they could. Even think about us being outside of Dearborn, Dearborners outside of Dearborn, and you probably have met people so many times, and I know I have, where I was the first Muslim they met, I was the first Arab they met, and they probably looked at me and didn't think like, oh, you're a Muslim girl? Oh, wait, where's your hijab? Or like, they didn't understand that there are so many different ways that Arab women look or Muslim women look, and there's so many different aspects to our identity, and didn't realize how intersectional we are. And I just think through storytelling, through media, through public opinion, and every single avenue with social media and creating spaces like this, that's the way that we do all of that.
I love that. I love that. That was amazing.
Thanks. Okay. So I guess my last question for you, if there's one problem in the community that you were able to just target, diminish, erase, what would that be?
So if I had to pick a very specific problem that has really, really, really bothered me, I think it would be our racism. That's something that has deeply upset me. And admittedly, I think that I also was part of the problem, because growing up in Dearborn, a lot of us were very unaware, and I was one of those very unaware people. Like, I didn't know growing up that you could be a Black Arab or a Muslim Arab. So I'm sure I was very, excuse me, I'm sure that I was very unintentionally racist in certain situations, just out of sheer ignorance. And then in other situations, because I just didn't know better. And that's not an excuse, but it's just to highlight how much of a bubble we were in, not having like not having black representation in our day-to-day lives and not really interacting with the black community that neighbors us. And so as soon as I went to college, I found myself gravitating towards specifically black students from Detroit, just because our experiences were kind of similar, like in high school, coming to a school that was predominantly white and feeling like an outsider. Obviously their identities are so much more visible, so I'm sure that they, like at Michigan, for example, like we're the only black person in their class. Whereas even though I knew I was the only Arab in my class, everyone else may not have known that because I could have blended in with whatever they thought I was, right? And but just really hearing those stories and learning to empathize with what their experiences were like, and then coming back home almost every weekend and hearing people throw around the N word or say like call black people Habib instead of Sood, you know. And I think the part where I really feel that I dropped the ball in those years was learning to still empathize with my community, and the fact that they stayed in Dearborn. I went and got this education. I went and got these experiences, and now I'm coming back and I want to shuf hale alayhim. Like I want to think that I'm better than them because I got a degree. Like who do I think I am? You know, and not to say so. I mentioned this a lot. I'm all about empathy and accountability. So in the past, I would like cuss people out, like why the hell are you talking like that? And I would put people on blast. We'd be at bonfire, someone would say the N word, and I would just flame them in front of everybody, and like that doesn't work. So like not only is it like selfish and kind of like arrogant for me to just like assume that people have experienced things that I've experienced. But if I really care about the cause and if I really care about the impact of changing my community and making us better people, I do need to find an approach that people actually want to listen to. So now that I'm older, and actually I learned this through teaching. So after undergrad, I became a teacher. In undergrad, I was a pretty angry person sometimes. And people would say something stupid, don't get caught slipping because Rima will flame you, right?
Yeah.
But then when I became a teacher, I was teaching predominantly black students. And a lot of my white counterparts who were also teachers were pretty racist in the classroom unknowingly. And so because I cared so much about my students, and I knew that once I let them out of my class, they may as well go in, like they would probably be going into a classroom where their teacher wasn't using their platform responsibly. I realized that it was up to me and people like me to have conversations with these white teachers and not do it from an angry, like aggressive standpoint because they don't want to listen. So if I actually want them to be better humans to their students, I have to chill out a little bit, right? I brought that back now to who I am in front of my community. And honestly, I don't think that I would even be a person that could be part of creating a platform like this because I was pretty angry with Dearborn for the majority of my like adolescent life. But now I'm just kind of like, no, like I get it. And I would rather be pouring into young people who thought like me, or who may not have had that other perspective, and get us to see how wrong it is of us to treat other people that way or to talk that way. And as harmless as we think it is sometimes in our own circles, it's actually extremely harmful because it creates a ripple effect. So to summarize your question, I think the racism, not just in our words and our actions, but even just like the learned racism that we have when we see a black person across the street, like what is our initial reaction when we see somebody, like when we just see people who, it doesn't even have to be the black community, like people who are not like us, our initial reaction, because we've been like conditioned to think a certain way, we're not immune to that. So we need to go back and kind of like habitualize different thoughts, like literally put different thoughts in our heads so that we can then treat people differently.
That's so powerful.
That's a problem that I really think that, especially with this platform, I really think that I want to devote my time helping us be better, because we are better. We're great people. We need to really like, you know, act on that.
That's so powerful because it's like learning, then unlearning, and then learning again.
Exactly.
Where it's just like that vehicle and that tool is just gonna be crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Super excited about that. Okay, so I guess I'm gonna ask you another question.
Yeah, but I want to ask you a question. You asked me one.
Okay, sorry, go.
So we're gonna wrap up. So I want to ask you a funner question because that just got deep.
Yeah,
and
it did.
We can both get deep. Let me think. So we're putting you on the spot because I only prepared 3, but I want to ask you a question. So. If you, this one is, I like this one. If you had to tell 14, 15, or 16-year-old Yasmeen something, what would you tell her right now?
Oh gosh. Okay, so I think I would start by telling her it's okay if you don't fit in. You're gonna eventually fit in. I think it's so one thing that I've learned to do is to think before I speak, but I think that being confident and being very, very, seeing the conviction of my words is something that I just started to learn. And like, I think that I would probably tell Yasmeen that it's okay if you don't fit in, but it's also see the power in your voice and see the power in not only your experience, but your ability to shape the experiences of others too. Because like me not seeing the value in Dearborn, I think at that age I didn't see the value in myself and
Wow.
my experiences too, where at a young age I was able to see like have experiences inside and outside of Dearborn that I was able to see how different and unique my community was, but I was never able to vocalize that. And I
Right.
think that now I'm starting to vocalize that a lot more clearly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would just tell her to just see the power in your words and to speak.
That's amazing. I love the way that you compare like not seeing Dearborn for what it was, and therefore because you're a product of that, not being able to see you for what you are.
Yeah, I mean, like taking we internalize our own oppression. I think I picked up that tagline from you, and it's just it's something that really stuck with me. I think that
Yeah.
was one of the first conversations we even actually had, and I think that, like unlearning that behavior too and just seeing the value of
Mm.
our words.
Mm.
But yeah, I do want to close with one question because I want to ask you this, and I've never asked you this question. But Rima,
Uh-oh.
why are you a proud Dearborn girl?
We ask everybody this at the end of the show. I'm not prepared. Okay. I'm a proud Dearborn girl because during the time when I didn't even realize how much I needed my community was there to remind me and show me exactly what it could do and just how much it could pour into me during a time where I was like very broken, you know? And it's crazy because sometimes when you hit rock bottom, you don't realize you're at rock bottom until someone pulls you up. And that feeling of like people pulling me up, not only was it the Dearborn community, but it was the women, like specifically the Dearborn women, women that I wasn't even close to, you know, just like reminding me that they're there for me and like pouring love into me in a way that only another woman could really do, let alone
Yeah.
another Dearborn woman. It was just like amazing. So I'll never forget that feeling, and I'll never forget how proud in those moments I felt to be who I am. And because of that, I want to spend a good part of the rest of my life doing this kind of work.
Amazing, amazing. That makes me so happy to hear. Okay, well,
Thank
thank
you.
you.